I'm going to show you how I create the black pen outline on my illustrations before I colour it. Have a look at a finished image here. This is an image from my upcoming children's picture book, and you can see how the black outline really accentuates that colour. That's why I love using black pen. In this drawing, there are so many different variations in the line. Look at the tiny lines in the fur there around the outline of her face. And then there's no outline at the very bottom of her little mouth. Along the side here, you can see these interrupted lines in intervals. I'm going to show you these techniques though on a piece of paper first. Then after that, I'll demonstrate on the image that I'm working on at the moment. The first thing to think about before you do your pen work is what sort of pen you want to use. Now I prefer the Staedtler pigment liner, and I use a 0.3 if it's a small drawing or 0.7 if it's a larger drawing. The reason why I choose this pen is because it is waterproof. It's so important for me to have a waterproof pen because I like to paint my images afterwards with watercolor techniques or inks, and then when that's dry I put the color pencil over the top. So think about that as well when you're doing your artwork. Are you going to be coloring it with water mediums? Then if so, you need a permanent marker or one that's waterproof on paper. Now to get started, have a try using your pen on a piece of scrap paper. Use it on the side, try it on the tip. Try a variety of markings and see what you can get just by using pressure. So try thick and then thin. So thicker and then thin, quick. Do it quickly. Use it on the side, use it on the tip. Do short lines, longer lines, and just get a feel for what your pen can do. Now the types of lines that I like to use when I'm outlining my drawing are what we call interrupted lines. So I don't usually just do a line like that or like that. I find those types of lines a little bit boring. So instead, I like to have interrupted lines. Let me show you those. So while I'm doing an outline, I allow my whole arm to travel down the page and then just lift the pen off a little bit every now and then to really create a beautiful line that's just natural. I even let the line wobble a little bit too sometimes. Whatever happens during the process of just pulling the pen across the page is perfectly okay. Lifting the pen up every now and then is really important so you get that wonderful variety in the edge of the line. Now another thing that I like to do is what is known as accents. Now accents are little darker areas in the drawing. So I might be starting my curve with an ordinary medium sort of width of line, and then I'll add a darker accent. So lighter and then darker. And these little accents are usually put in areas where it's either going into shadow or when I want to make something look like it's heavier, has more weight. So they're called accents, and this is interrupted line. I also love to do little tiny fur strokes. So you can have a try these, and when you're doing your stroke, give it a try of just easing off the pressure as you're applying it to the page. And try all different directions, give it a little curve, try straight first and see how you go with that straight. This is so handy, this technique, because you can do it for grass, for fur, for hair, for all kinds of things. There's just so much. And just pull the little stroke as you go. Curved and straight. Thick and thin. So you can get a thicker stroke by just pressing a little bit harder to start with, and then thinner by easing off the pressure. Try it long and short. So some short ones and some long ones. Just flicking your pen. Just have a bit of fun with it and have a play. Make sure you always practice before you go onto your artwork. Now I'm going to show you on the artwork that I'm actually working on at the moment. This is an image for my upcoming children's picture book as well, and you can see all the little cuddly cats tucked in bed ready to go to sleep. Now I've been working on this long line that you can see up here. I'll just show you a little bit down in this area here. I also like to use a sheet of glassine paper, which is a glossy sort of paper that you can buy from art stores. That helps your hand to slide, and it also protects the artwork while you're working on it, and a big sheet to cover it at the end preserves your artwork afterwards. So while I'm doing this area here, I'm thinking about the moonlight coming in from this window, hitting the top of the bed here. So it's going to be little interrupted lines, thinner, finer, using lots of variety. You don't want your lines to be the same width. You want to have short lines, longer lines coming right up, coming up and over. Making sure that you create lovely interrupted lines is really important. Now for these vertical lines, I'm going to go thicker and then gradually thinner because they're more in shadow at the top there, and then just tapering those lines as I travel down. So thicker and then thinner. So that's important too, to have variety in those tiny areas. And now as we move into the face, because the moonlight's coming from this side, but we do have reflected light coming from the wall, I'm going to just keep it really, really light around the top of the little nose and keep a bit of shadow underneath. You don't even need to go right around the whole nose. Just a little tiny bit of shadow in this area here, and then nice and light as you go around. The little turtle toy has got some shadow at the back underneath here, and then I can make it going lighter as it comes into the light using interrupted and dotted line, but then thicker back at the base of the shell there. The little eye can be just a little tiny bit darker on either side. So thinking about it all the time, darker and then coming out lighter towards the tips, and just interrupted line. Bit of interrupted line where the light's hitting it, and then darker in shadow. So that's the sort of process that I'm using to do the outline, really thinking about the light and shade. Shadow in there underneath the leg as it curves, and then just coming around very, very light in here. Bit of shadow there again, but not the same length as the other area, just coming down a bit lower. And also thinking about the inside, that's his little collar there. So there's going to be a bit of shadow underneath, nice and thick there, but then lovely and light along the tips where the light is hitting it. So highlight along the tip. Nice and a bit darker for the blanket just to send that back into the distance, and then a bit of interrupted line as it comes into the hand. Now let's do this little hand. So in the area here where the thumb sort of dips down, I'm going to do that darker and then lighter as it rises up. Let's put a darker shadow for the little sleeve, and lighter as the light hits it, nice interrupted, and then darker in there, darker underneath, coming out lighter towards the tip, darker underneath, and coming out lighter around the edge, very light on the inside, and darker in the corner here. So they're little accents that I'm creating. So accents are little areas that are darker, nice and light where the light's hitting it, light around the tips, even dots, because I want it so fine. Now when we're doing fabric, it's a very good idea to just do very, very light lines in the middle of the fabric. It can be darker around the edges, but very fine in the middle. And we've got some extra weight here, so we want it to be thicker and darker and lighter as it comes around. So lighter, darker in the shadow there, and lighter around the tips. Sorry, you can barely hear me because I just go off into another world. Don't you just love that when you draw, just escaping into another world? So just a few more, and coming around here, there's a bit of shadow under there. A few more lines needed. Bit of shadow, keep the variety in it. Always think of variety, variety in length and variety in where you're positioning your breaks in your lines as well. So you don't want them to be evenly divided down the line. For example, under here, we can go up and have a nice darker bit in here. And then we've got a little bit lighter, lighter, lighter. And see the variety in the length of line. Keep that variety at all times. So darker in here, and then gradually coming out to lighter. This one's very, very light, so I can do it in dashes. Darker underneath. Coming out a bit lighter in here because the moonlight's hitting it, going back into shadow. So that's how I create the black outline around my drawings. I hope you enjoyed that. If you want to see more from me, come see me over at drawpj.com.